Hey Daria, I wanted to take just a minute and go over the prompt and your essay and kind of give you some suggestions for feedback. So, the prompt for descriptive essay number one was for you to search your memory for starting with a person, place, or event that is very significant to you. It can be a person that's either dead or alive that is meaningful, a place, like maybe a place that you've vacationed before that's really memorable in your mind, or an event, maybe like an important game or something that you attended, a concert, something like that. And for you to take that event and describe it to your reader through a collection of objects that you associate with that person, place, or event. And so I told everybody to kind of think maybe like three significant objects as a good kind of baseline, that just in your mind represent that person, place, or event to you. And what you're going to do is you're going to talk about that person through the lens of those three objects. I gave you a sample essay that I'd written about my grandparents and their home and how it was such a meaningful place to me growing up. And I talked about two objects that always come to mind when I think about my grandparents and the time that I spent at their house. And so what I did was in my introduction, I talked about my connection with my grandparents' home and how some of my greatest childhood memories center around the time that I spent at their house, which was right next door to ours. And I talk about and introduce those two objects that always come to my mind when I think about it. When I think of our time together and who they were and what they meant to me, two objects will always come to mind: my grandmother's cookbook and my granddaddy's record player and radio console. Okay, so what I'm going to do next in my essay is I'm going to start by describing that connection through that object. Okay, so I talk about my grandmother's favorite cookbook. Then I talk about it in detail. I give lots of descriptive details on how it's meaningful, how it came to be, and what it means to me, what we did with the cookbook, cooking together with my grandmother, and that it was really important now to me because she has dementia and she doesn't cook anymore. And so now all I have left of that is that cookbook and the memories that we spent together around the stove. Then I switched to my second object, which was the radio console. And that was a big centerpiece in their house. And I talk about my granddaddy's connection with that. He loved to sing and he loved to play records, and he had this massive record connection. And he loved to, and some of my greatest memories of when I was little, we would sing and dance to all the records. And it was always on when I was a kid. And I loved going over there and, because my granddaddy always had a record playing, or the radio was on. And so many memories I have of him and me dancing and listening to his records. And he would be like, let me show you this record that I got. And so before he died, I was actually able to, he gifted me the console. We had to move some medical equipment in and we had to rearrange their living room, and he wanted me to have the record console and his records so that I would have that to remember him by. And so now when I see that in my own home, it makes me think about all those times that we spent together and all the records, and it's just a very memorable object for me. And so then in my conclusion, I talk about their lives. I talk about the fact that my grandmother has dementia. I talk about the fact that my grandfather has passed now, that he's passed away, and that when I look at those two objects, all those memories and all those times that we spent together, they come back to me, and it's they're in my home. I have them in my possession now, and they will always make me think about them, and I'll always cherish them. No amount of money in the world will ever replace them for me. And to some people, they may not be a big deal, but for me, those two objects signify who my grandparents were, and I explain that in my essay. And so when I'm looking at your essay, you start off in a narrative format. You're telling a story, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but for the purposes of this essay, you kind of want to steer away from telling a story and more about describing a person, place, or event that's memorable for you. And so I tried really to find that. And so let me first say that I think that you have a really good writer's voice. And if you were telling a story, and if the prompt asked you to tell a story, you would have nailed this assignment. But for the purposes of this essay, your particular choices that you've made, I'm not really seeing that concept. I tried to look at it from the point with, is it a rainy day, like that's the event that you're thinking about, and then I'm looking at your different things and trying to see. But because it was told in such a narrative structure, it was hard for me to pick out exactly what you were trying to, and to make that meet the confines of the prompt. If I had asked you to describe a rainy day, and I think that you did that very well, because I'm looking at, the all the objects and things like that. But because it's so far from the confines of the prompt, and prompt writing is so important, because probably every assignment that you're going to be given in college is going to be, can you follow a prompt? And you got to be able to meet the prompt with what you are writing about. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad essay in terms of that, but it just didn't meet the confines of the prompt. So what you could do is, if you wanted to talk about rainy days, and I think you talk about your grandmother. I think it was your grandmother, yes, because she took care of a wound. Maybe you associate rainy days and your grandmother. And this is just, I'm just spitballing here some ideas of how to kind of rearrange it. In your introduction, just say that was what you decided to talk about, rainy days with your grandmother, and like how like a memory, maybe it's an important memory or something significant, or maybe you want to just write about your grandmother and that kind of thing, and you associate rainy days with her, because rainy days could be one of your objects that you associate with your important person, place, or thing. What you would do is you would introduce that important person, place, or event in your introduction, and you would introduce the objects that you're going to be exploring in your essay. And then paragraph 1 would be about object number 1 and making that connection back to that person, place, or event. Paragraph 2, the body paragraph 2, it's actually paragraph 2, 3, and 4. But body paragraph 2 would be the second object, body paragraph 3 would be the third object, or, and then your conclusion would just tie all of that back together. You would reiterate those objects that you talked about, and you would talk about how they connect with that important person, place, or event in your life. And so I think that you can still use a lot of your ideas, and just tailoring it a little bit to make it meet the confines of the prompt. So as far as time wise, so you can rewrite an essay for the end of the term that you want to do. So you could wait and write it then and just focus more on your other essay that you need to be writing for this week. Or you can just write it in your spare time if you want to rewrite it. I just don't, looking at it the way that it is, and without even kind of looking for grammatical errors, which I didn't see a lot, because you do have a good writer's voice, but because it doesn't meet the confines of the prompt, it would be a low B or a C paper starting off without even getting into the grammar and mechanics. And I think that you're a better writer than that. And so I'm not saying all that to discourage you in any way. I just don't want to grade it the way that it is and give you a grade like that because it doesn't meet the prompt. So hopefully this helps. You can take all the time you need to get it turned back in. Like, I'm totally willing to read it. If you don't get it this week or next week, like, you can write it at a later date. That's fine. focus on the essay that you have due this week, which is a narrative. It's a narrative story. And then you can come back and rewrite your descriptive essay when you're ready to write about it.